Possibly the biggest news story going around right now is the release of the executive summary of the CIA torture report. It is a massive volume, some 6,000 pages, with a reported 35,000 footnotes. This certainly will contain a great deal of information. Even the executive summary itself contains a fair bit of information that gives us a bit of an insight into a lot of what has taken place with all of this torture. And just from what little has been released, we begin to see more and more essentially the real face of imperialism. And we know that a lot of this torture that took place on people who literally didn't do anything. Most of the people who were detained and tortured didn't have anything to do with any acts of terrorism or any anti-imperialist actions whatsoever. Now here is just a small sample of some of the inhumanities that are listed in the document. The CIA used previously unreported tactics, including rectal feeding of detainees. CIA officers threatened the children of detainees. Over 20% of CIA detainees were wrongfully held. One was an intellectually challenged man who was held so the CIA could get leverage over his family. One detainee, Abdullah Hadifa, was subjected to ice water baths and 66 hours of standing sleep deprivation before being released because the CIA realized it probably had the wrong man. The CIA, contrary to what it told Congress, began torturing detainees before even determining whether they would cooperate. CIA officers began torturing killing Khalid Sheikh Mohammed a few minutes after beginning to question him. The CIA planned to detain KSM incommunicado for the rest of his life, without charge or trial. The CIA torturers told CIA leadership that torture wasn't producing good information from KSM, but CIA leaders didn't relay that information to Congress. A detainee was tortured for not addressing an interrogator as "sir" and for complaining about a stomach ache. CIA officers cried when they witnessed the waterboarding of Abu Zabdea. Within weeks of his arrival in custody, CIA Zabdea was on life support and unable to speak. Bush Justice Department official Jay Bybee, who is now a federal judge, told Congress the torture of al-Qaeda detainees led to the U.S. capture of Jose Padilla. That wasn't true. The Secretary of State wasn't informed when the CIA made secret deals to open detention facilities abroad. Even President George W. Bush wasn't informed when the facilities were, because he feared he'd accidentally disclose the information. Even from what little information is available here, it tells us a great deal about American society and real American values. Despite every effort by the government to tell its citizens and to tell the world that they are the saviors of humanity, that they are the true beacons of freedom and democracy, this is the mode in which they care to operate. This speaks very true to what it is the American empire has always been about. This is nothing new. Torturing and murdering people is a very long and tremendous part of U.S. history. That despite all the bluster that they give us, despite all the flag waving with the troops about being there to promote freedom and democracy, none of that is true. This, and just even this little piece of information that we've been given thus far, tells us everything about what it's really all about. It has gotten so bad that even the UN is now starting to stand up to the United States. A high-ranking UN official said that this definitely shows that there was systemic knowledge of torture right from the bottom all the way to the top, and that even the top of the highest powers in government went along with it and advocated it and argued for it and even gave the order for it. And that this is not a small thing. This is not an aberration. This is not just some interrogator went too far or some corrupt official in the military took it upon himself to do whatever he felt was necessary to do his job. This shows definite systemic abuse of human rights at the highest levels of power. And even now the UN is asking for an investigation. They're asking for trials for war crimes that have taken place. But let's be realistic. We know that's not going to happen. It is now time to take action. The individuals responsible for the criminal conspiracy revealed in today's report must be brought to justice and must face criminal penalties commensurate with the gravity of their crimes. The fact that the policies revealed in this report were authorized at high level within the U.S. government provides no excuse whatsoever. Indeed, it reinforces the need for criminal accountability. There was a clear policy orchestrated at a high level within the Bush administration, which allowed to commit systemic crimes and gross violations of international human rights law. But I think we're all pretty confident that absolutely nothing will happen to those who committed these acts whatsoever. The entire U.S. government is going to wash its hands of absolutely everything. It will deal with a little bit of political blowback from this, and a lot of damage control and spinning will come from the media, particularly thus far that which has come from Fox News, whose primary answer to these revelations about torture have been, "America's great," as if somehow that justifies the torture, or that means the torture didn't happen. And many people have even gone on Fox News and have outright overtly defended these tremendously criminal actions. Now, this has gotten so bad that Obama has appointed a guy from the ACLU to actually go in and investigate all this. Meanwhile, the head of the ACLU right now is actually saying that people should be pardoned for having committed this torture for some of the most baffling reasons possible. Now, despite strong outrage, the Department of Justice says it will not be pushing charges against those involved in the interrogations, adding that the report does not yet yield enough evidence to lead to a conviction. The Department of Justice attempted to carry out 2 investigations into the abuse of detainees in 2009, but concluded that the evidence was insufficient. The department said it was looking through the report and did not find anything new, any new information that they had not previously considered in reaching their determination. Now, Executive Director Anthony Romero, who is the current head of the American for Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, is actually asking that pardons be given to George W. Bush and other members of the Obama administration. He says by convicting these people, or at the very least, putting them on trial for the crimes that they have committed, would be somehow opening up some kind of a precedent to make things worse. I really cannot imagine why they would be doing this. Why is it that George Bush should be given a pardon for having committed these crimes? And in fact, in courts in other countries, George Bush has already been convicted of these crimes. And they're talking about having another trial, even with them in absentia. And he'll, of course, get convicted. But absolutely nothing will happen to him whatsoever. We know very well from the very structure of the U.S. government and the amount of power it has, and by power I mean financial influence and guns, that nothing will happen to these people in any way, shape, or form. There will not be any justice so long as the U.S. empire exists. Justice cannot be carried out. The real irony being that these people say that they're elected to these positions to carry out people's freedoms and to uphold the Constitution, they say. And it's all very telling how all of this has been revealed, and this couldn't be any better proof of the real criminality of the U.S. government and what it has done to people worldwide than this. And it still will not be enough to find any punishments for the people involved. Now, meanwhile, a recent poll suggests that 68% of Americans feel that at least sometimes torture of people is justified. Now think about that. Despite all the public outrage over this, despite the cries of the recent violence that has been carried out against the U.S. population itself, more specifically the black population, 68% of the population still agrees with using torture at least sometimes. What does this really tell us? Most of the torture that has been carried out since the beginning of the war on terror has been against third world countries, and largely has had nothing to do with terrorism whatsoever, but has had more to do with suppressing the populations of those countries for the benefit of the ruling elite, and by proxy, the benefits of even the working class in the United States and the rest of the first world. But knowing the popular anger that there is towards these wars, the amounts of the population that don't agree with the wars, think they were based on lies, and want them over, they still, in a majority, believe that torture is still a legitimate option, even when they know these wars are based on lies. And even knowing that probably a majority of the people who have been tortured in this situation were not guilty of anything whatsoever. This shows that despite their outrage, first world people, particularly Americans, are still okay with the systemic torture of people in the third world who don't toe the line, at the very least, don't toe the line of U.S. imperialist expansion. And this shows a lot more about how first world people just do not care about the suffering that they are a part of in the third world. That they have not been willing in any serious manner to actually challenge the imperialist empire that they're a part of. They only argue to vote for the same two parties that have carried it all out. They tell you to join the system and change it from within. They tell you to take all these liberal democratic measures to try to stop something that supersedes democracy itself. And this shows that despite all of that, despite all of their good intention, they still support the torture of third world people who, at the very least, would stand against having their countries occupied by a foreign military. And I think this is another piece that really shows that it's not just the U.S. empire that really is the problem. First world people, in general, are the problem. Because in the end, they are still advocating the torture of people who just didn't want to fulfill the desires of that same empire that those first world people are a part of.